Hello, thanks for joining me, Astrologer Patrick Arundell. Today I'm going to talk about Venus moving through the sign of Gemini, which is going to happen for 4 long months this year. Now this begins today on Friday the 3rd of April at 6:11 GMT, so based on Greenwich Mean Time in London. And this is the chart for that ingress, so we can see Venus up here at 0 degrees Gemini. So what I want to do today is outline what this event chart is telling us in terms of how this overall influence will be, but also I'm then going to point out some of the catches with Venus going into shadow and then into retrograde. The shadow period actually lasts quite a long time after she comes out of retrograde, so that is something to be mindful of. Also, Venus forges 2 very important angles through this period. It's going to be squaring up with Neptune for an extended period of time, which can create some real confusion, but it also forges an amazing link with Mars. And obviously, when Venus and Mars are working well together, that can have some very positive outcomes. Now, first of all, I'd like to say if you're new to my channel or you're yet to subscribe, I'd be honoured if you did so now. Please also comment. I answer every single one. I see this is very much a two-way street between us. Also, please feel very welcome to subscribe for your free daily horoscope and my in-depth astrology magazine, which comes out once a month. I'd also be very grateful if you consider becoming one of my patrons, or if you'd like a one-to-one live reading with me, or to order your personal astrology, please see the links beneath this video. Most of all, I'd like to say I hope you're well as you're watching this. Now, as we kick off, obviously the world is still reeling from the COVID-19 situation. And one of the things that's been particularly marked, for me anyway, apart from pretty well South Korea and Germany and a few smaller countries, I don't mean that in any kind of disparaging way, but in terms of population size, the rest of the Western world is struggling to get to grips with this. And I think one of the reasons for that is to do with communication. And Mercury, the planet of communication, has been going through an extended journey in the sign of Pisces, where it is not happy at all. So that's going to emerge into the sign of Aries on the 11th of April. And that's going to be a great benefit to us all. We're also going to go through over the next few days a conjunction between Mercury and Neptune. Neptune can be a very healing as well as distorting influence. And Mercury in the sign of Pisces can have some potentials to be very compassionate, to use our communication in a way to help others. But because it is distorted somewhat itself here, the clarity we like from Mercury in this rather subconscious transit has meant that I do feel there's been a lack of joined up thinking. Now, Venus, of course, is the planet of love and affection, but it's also to do with communication, particularly in the sign of Gemini, which of course is governed by air. So what we're going to see over the next 4 months is us all developing our skill sets when it comes to interacting through digital mediums because of the need for social distancing. But also it's going to throw up some frustrations, clearly, because of that. Because Venus in Gemini, to be honest, is absolutely glorious. This is about mixing and mingling. It's about being flirty. It's about being quick-witted and playful. Because Gemini, being the 3rd zodiac sign, is mutable, so it's able to flex well. Also, Venus is about allure, it's about attracting things to us, so our ideas can be very attractive to others. So I think for us all, because we perhaps will have some limitation on our freedom of movement, at least in the short term, I think it is going to be important to try to use the mental capacity of Gemini and the attraction of Venus to try to learn new skills, new knowledge, which then can be very positive for us, perhaps even financially, because Venus also governs money, which a lot of people don't know about. So here we are. That's the background to this situation. And as we start off today, we can see that Venus is in Gemini by 0 degrees, 0 minutes. And in this particular day chart, constructed on Greenwich Mean Time at 6:11 p.m., we can see the ascendant is 0 degrees in Libra, and therefore Venus is in the 9th house. Now I think that's a smashing place for Venus to be, because it's kind of saying to us, wherever we are in the world, even if we can't physically travel in the way that we would like, and I do feel there's going to be an improvement in that situation as the weeks go by, we have got this Gemini midpoint between the Sun in Aries, the Moon in Leo, which are actually in a beautiful, wonderful, warming trine, which is very good news. So what we've got here is this midpoint, the balance of the Sun, our desire, our soul energy, the Moon, our emotions, our relating. It's very much fierier, with the fire energy of the Sun and the Moon, but the midpoint between them is Aries in Gemini in the 9th house, which to me speaks of all of us all over the world, how we relate. So we are going to be relying a lot on Skype and Zoom and Team Talk and all these other kind of apps, FaceTime, Facebook, live streams as well, can all be brilliant to try to connect us, which is going to be a very important thing to do at this time. But if we think about Venus going through Gemini and we take into account this chart, we can see straight away that Venus is forging a very positive angle to Saturn, which is just 0 degrees in Aquarius. In fact, Saturn and Mars are conjunct, and the first 2.5 degrees in the Indian Dward system, which is known as the 12th harmonic, means that both Saturn and Mars are in the most Aquarius part of their journey through the sign of Aquarius. Saturn's not going to move out of that Dward until really late this year, because it's only going to be in the sign of Aquarius initially through to the early part of the 2nd of July. But Mars is, of course, going to be moving much quicker. So we can see that in that first part of Aquarius, that's where the Uranian energy is really much sharper. So we could be attracted in our relating to someone who has a more individualistic take on life. You could find yourself much more wrapped by astrology, which is governed by Aquarius, and Mercury, the planet of communication which governs Gemini, is exalted in the sign of Aquarius. So this can be a good time to gain knowledge about astrology. It can be a great time to talk to people who have a different, more independent view of life. This person can still be a nurturing person in the 4th house, that's the mum, and in the 10th house we have the inverting North Node, and of course that is going to be moving back into the sign of Gemini on the 5th of May, which is going to help this overall welter of extra potential to communicate in different, more imaginative ways. So on this day chart, there's a lot to celebrate with this connection between Saturn, Mars and Venus. Saturn is also very stabilizing, so somebody with wisdom can be very helpful if we reach out to them, but also someone who may have a more independent view of life through Mars, but that can still be very attractive. We can still chat to people online, even if you're single. I actually feel that people will be really connecting to people online at the moment, because it's just an obvious thing to do if people are more socially isolated. But it doesn't just stop with the fact that the Moon and the Sun are in such a beautiful relationship, or that the midpoint is in Gemini, or that we've got the North Node going into Gemini on the 5th of May, or that we've got Venus in Gemini for 4 long months. It usually is only in each zodiac sign for 28 days. So this extension is coming because of the retrograde. But if we just widen the orb a little bit, we can see that Venus is actually in a very positive angle with the part of fortune, which is Arabic astrology, Hellenistic astrology, so the parts of lots. So that points towards communication easing our emotional load. Also, Jupiter and Pluto are coming into almost an exact conjunction in the next day or two, and they on a wider, about 6 degrees, a wider orb, which is still quite close, are in a great angle also with Venus. It's disassociate in terms of the trine, but it is there. So I feel the medium of communication means that the way the response to COVID-19 is going to pick up is with greater understanding and clarity. Not quite yet. I think it will really start to build up from the 11th of April, whether it's the amount of beds that there are, whether it's the amount of rest facilities for care workers, the amount of personal protective clothing for health workers, the amount of tests that we all have access to, particularly in the Western world. It's really not been very good at all in the United Kingdom. But I think energy is going to be coming together to really get on the front foot to deal with this situation. You can see that Mercury is advancing to this conjunction with Neptune, and it is, obviously it is conjunct by just under 1 degree at the moment, and guess what, in the 6th house of health. So I think more and more information is going to be coming. I was reading earlier about some virologists in Germany. One particular town in Westphalian has been hit quite badly, and they're there studying all the kind of social interactions of the people there to try to understand how they got COVID-19. And all this information will be shared more and more. Very Venus in Gemini, the sharing of information. The Chinese have been criticised obviously for the original outbreak, which was linked to that wet market, and also for keeping stum about the outbreak for a couple of weeks, which was not helpful. And there's also the sense that maybe they've covered up the figures in order to make themselves look better, but they did release quite a lot of information. And today again I've read that hydroxychloroquine, which I take for my rheumatoid arthritis, it is being used successfully by a number of countries. It's a malaria drug in the fight back against COVID-19. So all this pooling of ideas is going to be really, really exciting. But for us personally, what does this transit mean? Well, I've made some notes. And the shadow period begins really quite soon on the 7th of April, and it's going to go on through to the 29th of July. So Venus is asking us in the retrograde, which begins on the 13th of May and goes on to the 24th of June, particularly during that period, it's asking us to think of relationships not in a usual way. It's asking us to be more reflective about them. So get deeper into what our needs are, but also more mindful of what other people's needs are that interact with us. So this can make us less selfless, particularly in the 9th house, particularly with Pluto in the mix of transformation. I think there is a real opportunity here for us all to grow. Now, the challenges come from the fact that from the last day of May through to the 5th of June, Venus and Mars are in a square. That's because Mars is making its way through the sign of Pisces at that time. But the more critical, difficult square is from the 21st of April through to the 27th of May. And that's when Venus is in a square with Neptune in the sign of Pisces. So they're both mutable. If you do get chatting to someone online and they seem like the bee's knees, just remember, it's not until we meet people in person in any situation, whether it's through work or it's through a hobby interest or it's moving to a new town and someone says, I want to introduce you to so-and-so, they're absolutely fabulous, you'll love them, and then we meet them and we don't necessarily think they're fabulous. We have to experience people firsthand. So I think from the 27th of April through pretty well to the end of May, if you are connecting with anyone new, just keep a little bit of yourself back. Someone might present a side of themselves that seems extremely captivating and wonderful. We could easily put them on a pedestal to find that they do have those proverbial feet of clay. But there's also this superb opportunity. And from July the 1st, for the first 3 weeks of July, despite Venus still being in shadow, Venus forges a gorgeous angle with Mars. And Mars is going to be in its dignity in the sign of Aries, which it governs. And Venus likes being in Gemini. It's fun. You know, it is about naughty text messages and being a bit cheeky and perhaps not being entirely committed to someone we might encounter, but having some fun. It is a lighter, more frivolous, frothier influence that we'd all cry out for at this time of particular difficulty for us all. But I think the more philosophical side of Venus going through Gemini is an opportunity for us to all learn new skills of relating, become much less person-centric in terms of ourselves and much more conscious of other people. Now there is one challenge on this day chart, and it involves this asteroid here, which ironically also governs relating, which is in the sign of Libra. And this is Juno, and it is in retrograde, but it's in opposition with the Sun. So it actually forges a beautiful sextile with the Moon. So I think what this is saying today is there is huge potential for growth around our understanding of relating, but just be conscious that balancing our individual needs against other people is the trick on this particular day chart. Now we've also got the full moon of the 8th of April, which is going to be in Libra, which is ironic. It's also going to be very close to Juno, and it is going to call out the same axis of trying to balance the individual needs we have with our interactions with others. So that's going to be a theme for the next couple of weeks. But I will tell you, loads of great Gemini energy is flooding into the last part of May. We have a conjunction between Venus and Mercury on the 21st, despite Venus's retrograde, and the Sun also moves on the same day into Gemini. And also 2 days later we have a sensational new moon which links with Saturn. By the end of May, I do feel the light at the end of the tunnel will be beginning to show, but I say that with a great deal of reverence. There are people out there suffering, and they're suffering, I think, not because of astrology, not because of this virus, but because the health service of the United Kingdom in particular has been so stripped down and dismantled. There has not been the labs and the energy and the resources to spring into action to deal with this pandemic. So it is a huge lesson to us all about how connected we are. And my wife's mother, I won't call her my mother-in-law, she's absolutely lovely. She said, isn't it ironic that we all talk about an article or a video clip going viral, and now we have had a bug going viral? So it's almost like she's saying, have we kind of invited this in? Have we manifested this into our situation? I think it's a brilliant concept. But I think we can learn from this period, from communicating better. I definitely think there's going to be a lot more software and apps coming in to track people down, help isolate them, and all this knowledge is going to be pulled about drugs, treatments, responses, what caused the infection, the amount of infectiousness. So this Gemini energy, this melting pot of ideas and buzz, can work out productively. Now, how is it going to turn out for each zodiac sign? So for you, Aries, well, you start off the zodiac, don't you? So with your Sun forging a wonderful alliance with the Moon as we start off this period, but having Juno in opposition, I do think generally that your words and also your ideas can be critical to who you can connect to. So it could be through taking on a new interest or study group that you connect to someone that you find really quite magnetic and very captivating. But it's your communicational ideas in an everyday context which come under the astral spotlight. Now, Taurus. Now, a lot of us are taking a hit financially. And it is true to say that when Venus and Neptune are in that right angle from the 27th of April through to pretty well the 27th of May, this is not the greatest time to go into a financial relationship with a friend. You know, that classic get rich quick idea. But if you're very cautious with your resources, I think by the time that Venus moves into Cancer on the 8th of August, you will be starting to make more sense of this. You will actually probably also find your attitude to consumption is going to change. You may find you can get along fine with some things less than you have had it in the past, and actually let it go. It's absolutely fine. But in terms of your love life, I think if you do want to get closer to an existing partner, it probably, ironically, will be over good food and wine. Now, Gemini yourself, you're going to be emanating an eminently sparkling and vivacious vibe. What's new, you might say? Well, that is going to be ramped up, but sincerity is very important, particularly when Neptune and Venus are in that square. And you could find that someone's going to come into your world through work. It may be an introduction through your family, but I think generally, again for you, it's going to be an openness to new ideas which can bring some light and magic into your world around relating over the next 4 months. Cancer. Now this is really fascinating because Venus is going to be stuck and joined by the North Node on the 5th of May in your 12th solar house. Someone that's out of your life, you may have a yearning to bring them back into your life, or get in contact, or feel very sentimental for that person, or there may be an existing relationship that just ain't working and you feel it needs to end. That is possible. A huge amount of deep emotional consideration around your love life and relationships in general is set to unfold. Leo, well, you've got it all to go for. The moon in this day chart in your sign, forging a fabulous angle with the Aries sun, which is all about expansion for you, but you have Venus in your sector of friendships. Let's hope by the end of May there is going to be, in certain parts of the world anyway, some lifting of the lockdowns and people can start to mix and mingle, because I do feel that you are someone who can have a huge impact on people, and it could be someone in your friendship circle or who you're about to be introduced to that can actually play an important part. If you're involved, celebrate the things you have in common. Try not to peck each other's heads over the things that you find tricky. Virgo, wow, Venus has moved into the most supersensual part of your horoscope in terms of how you are perceived by people you come into contact with. So it could be that someone sees you as a bit of a leader. It may be someone at work fancies you. It could be someone from a different age group. But because the sun is in a very deep part of your situation and the moon is locked away in your 12th house, watch out for the signals. They may not be particularly obvious, but someone could still hold a real thing for you, but they may be quite shy about showing it. Libra, you're ruled by Venus. So Libra, obviously having the ascendant in your sign and Juno, despite the retrograde, is of help. But Venus is in the part of your horoscope to do with travel, and if this lockdown wasn't going to be going on, I think your connection to travel or meeting someone romantically or having a flirty holiday fling would have been entirely and eminently possible. And of course, in this particular chart, the sun is in your 7th house. This can be good for your relationships. This is a brilliant solar return, and I think an improvement in some home, emotional and family relationships for you as well. Now, at Scorpio. Scorpio, when you love big and you love deep. And Venus being in Gemini is going to bring out that side of you that can be very passionate. Now that's difficult to act out if you're not cohabiting with someone at the moment. If you are, I think you need to change things up a little bit. That part of you that does have a tendency to love routine, or at least love the things that you love to the point that it's difficult for you to sort of flex, you're being pushed at this time to be a little bit more open-minded about who you or how you interact. If you can't physically meet up with someone at the moment, I think you can be having some saucy contact online for sure. And also your words and ideas continue to be very passionate, with both Jupiter and your modern ruler of Pluto in that conjunction. you also have a magical link between Mercury and Neptune, in the sense that someone could captivate you through their love of music, their love of the arts, their love of creativity. But it could be someone through work, if you are still working, or you're working from home, someone you get chatting to. Now, Sagittarius, Venus is in your opposite sign, so that's your 7th house. So of all the zodiac signs, you probably have one of the most glorious opportunities, along with Aquarius folks, to make this work well for you. So Venus is going to be asking you to be a bit more diplomatic, a little bit more sensitive to other people. I'm not saying you're not sensitive, but you can be frank and to the point. And Sagittarius people can pin people with their ideas, and that's it. That's the end of the conversation. So try to modify and moderate that a little bit. What Venus is asking you to gain in your relating outlook over this next 4 months is more an approach of interaction, of more of an approach of balance. And with both a wonderful location of the moon for you, and the sun, and even Juno, it's all to go for you. Just don't sweat it if someone's got slightly different values to you, particularly over money. Now, if they've got different emotional values, I definitely think you should take notice of that, because that's a very important guiding principle. But I think if they're just not as well off as you at the moment, or you're not as well off, don't let that inhibit you if someone takes your fancy over this next 4 months. Now, Capricorn, it is true to say that Venus is in actually quite a practical part of your horoscope, but it could mean that getting the household domestic chores shared more evenly between you and yours, if you're living in, can be a much better way to improve the overall atmosphere and sense of unity between you. If that is a problem, I think you need to use a little bit of diplomacy, and you can use that diplomacy and subtlety with Mercury and Neptune together at this time. But also there should be no doubt in your determination to make a change, because obviously you still have Venus and Pluto together. You also have Mars in this chart in the really quite lovely 2nd house. That's making you really appreciate that good food and wine. So if you do have an opportunity to chat to someone you fancy, you could find yourself talking about when you're going to get together finally to have that lovely meal and share a nice bottle of wine. Now, Aquarius. Now, interestingly, this particular Saturn and Mars conjunction sits right on my Sun. It's also pretty close to my midpoint at 5 degrees between my moon and my Sun, which are both in Aquarius, and it's forging a gorgeous trine to my Sun as well as these two. So thank you. I think Alicia and I can really take a lot of heart from this. Her Venus is also 0 degrees Aquarius, and her draconic Sun 29 degrees Capricorn. So that's lovely to take our relationship to the next level of enjoyment and commitment. Beautiful. We got married. We've already done that, and it's going great. But if you are footloose and fancy free, here's a wonderful opportunity to display all of the best of yourself by being a bit idiosyncratic, but being very kindly and very warm, but a consciousness of all the 12th house energies that have been going on over the last few years quite ferociously is very important. And of course Mars is in a square with Uranus broadly by 3 degrees in this chart, so just be aware of your tendency to impatience. Or should I be saying that to myself? I think it's to me. So, but on the whole, very positive for you, Aquarius. Just be conscious that someone you live with or a family member could be a bit of a wind-up for you at the moment, if they tend to sort of be very unpredictable, want everything on their own terms, but it's all about compromise, particularly in these rather constrained times. Now, Pisces, with Saturn and Mars in your 12th house, that's not great, to be honest. That can be quite challenging, but you do have Jupiter, your ruler, and Pluto together in your 11th house of friendship, and you have Neptune, your ruler, conjunct Mercury. You can certainly captivate someone with that kind of shimmering energy of yours, that outer worldliness, that mystique, which is very strong to your nature. You're probably quite focused on someone who can switch you on, ideas, and also someone who can look after you, or at least you can relate to on a more practical financial level. But you're going to find yourself with Venus's help moving home in the next 4 months, if it's possible, or certainly improving where you live now. So don't be surprised if you're getting out the paintbrushes and wallpaper and doing some home improvements. You may find yourself working on crafts and hobbies and all that kind of stuff as well. That can all be very therapeutic for you. But I do think that if you're in a living relationship where there have been some secrets, is a strong word, but certainly unaddressed angers or frustrations, with Mars in your 12th house in a sharp aspect with Uranus in your 3rd house, I do think that tempers can get frayed, and maybe some stuff that has been bottled up does need to come out. But once it does, try to find a sense of peace, calm, tranquility by agreeing how it's going to be at home for both of you. And that may mean that the way things have been needs resetting some way. But I think it is possible that if a relationship hasn't been working very well, there could be an end point. I'm just being honest about that. But that will only happen if that's ripe for your life. The stars are not making it happen for you. Yes, they impel us, but they don't make us. So there is a difference. So that's today's show, folks. I'd love it, as I said before, if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel, my magazine, your free daily horoscope. Yes, so there's all those goodies underneath this page that you can tune into. But for now, please stay safe, and good luck and goodbye.